Hey, howdy, everybody. I'm Spencer Clemens. I'm president of William Cole Companies, and we run the Design Spark Innovation Center here. And happy to have my friend James Benham with us today.
We're both buddies with James Lancaster.
Yeah, we know James Lancaster.
We and I are both going, where is he?
He's here somewhere, right? And glad you're here tonight. Really appreciate you showing up. Like Shelley said, this is the Design Spark Innovation Center. It's one of our pet projects at our company at William Cole. We're hospitality, real estate developers, but we're also creators, right? We've created businesses, nothing like my friend James has created, but we've created a lot of various real estate businesses, hospitality. The Stella Hotel is our creation, the Josie Hotel in Roslyn, British Columbia, Traditions Club, things like that. So I can commiserate a little bit with this gentleman to my right, but he definitely has much more knowledge on the subject than I do. Although I do have his book kind of on my phone here, the top 10 rules here, and we're going to go through some of these things. So welcome, James.
Thanks.
Glad you're here. And tell us a little bit about why this book. How did this book come out and through you, and why do you think it's an important time for this book?
Well, first off, thank you all for being here. I know so many of you, and I really appreciate you being here. And I have some original clients in the room. I want to thank you for doing business with me 20 years ago and helping me get off the ground. That's what bootstrapping is about. And one of my fellow teaching colleagues, my nephew Zach, is here, and some of my fish from C2. And I just, my good friends at Polino. Just everybody who came, I really appreciate it. I could not have known how timely this topic would be.
It's very timely.
And I'm actually glad this is one of the only cases I'm glad a project was past due. If you know me, I like things done on time and done right. Isn't that right, nephew? And I spend a lot of time trying to mentor folks. And this project, it was late. But when the economy did what it did, I was like, man, this is more timely than I thought it could be, because we're entering a time when the capital markets are going to be increasingly difficult to raise money from. Already are.
Sure.
Money will be harder to come by. Business is, we're already seeing the usual harbinger of mass layoffs, right? And tech.
Well, Amazon, right?
Amazon just announced. Meta just announced. I mean, there's a lot of big companies that are announcing these reductions in labor force, and so we're going to have to deal with something coming up. You and I have been through a few of these, and so the original goal was to encapsulate the advice I give and all the folks I mentor. I've had the pleasure of mentoring young cadets like these guys in the back since 2007. A good friend of mine and I started a mentoring program for cadets, and I've been involved in the business school, and I've had a lot of interns for the last 15 years, and so I've gotten the real pleasure of mentoring a lot of Aggies through college and then through starting their own business. And I get a lot of requests for people, because I've been speaking for 17 years. I've keynoted over 400 conferences. I get a lot of requests for mentorship and advice, and I wanted something that would encapsulate all of it. My dad taught me a lot and as well, and I thought it would be good to document that knowledge, because I kind of feel like through my time, I got 2 degrees in the business school here, they do a lot of teaching about finance and accounting and management and information systems and all these techniques and tools, but they don't actually teach you how to start and run a business. That's actually a different skill, and I know you guys can acknowledge this. They teach you the functions of business, right. But my dad taught me how to run a business. Yeah. EOS taught me how to run a business. My mentors and they taught me how to run a business, and in particular, there's not enough emphasis, I think, on bootstrapping. Yeah. But 95% of companies are going to have to do it. I mean, raising money is a rare thing. Yeah. And so that was kind of the whole point, was to pull these principles together and talk about bootstrapping.
Well, I think it's really timely, because you think about our whole society has gone to go big or go home, right? I mean, think about it. When I was growing up in baseball, you had Pete Rose, you had Tony Gwynn, you had Wade Boggs. These guys hit singles, right? Tons of singles and doubles and singles and doubles and singles and doubles. And they would teach you in baseball to make sure your elbow's up, and make sure that bat is flat coming through. It's a level swing. Well, how do they swing today? They swing loopy. Home run. We're going to hit a home run or nothing. Home run or nothing. American Idol, right? American Idol. You can bypass the 10 years of singing in the bars and the honky tonks, go to American Idol and get your big record contract. So is this kind of a response to people saying, hey, I'm just going to go out and get $50 million from VCs?
Well, the problem the problem with studying business is that very few people write the books about the failures, right? I mean, why would you want to? And so there are people like Malcolm Gladwell who do study success and failure,
Yeah.
Jim Collins. I mean, some really great business analysts. But there's a lot of press and attention paid to the unicorns, right? In tech, in all business, a unicorn is $1 billion valuation or more. It used to be a rare thing, now it's a common thing.
Sure.
We just watched a $50 billion company evaporate overnight. FTX,
Yes.
FTX.
A
That happened.
30-year-old founder, which is just
Yeah, a 30-year-old founder
mind-blowing
who
to me.
it appears was running a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
Turns out when you guarantee 8 to 10% returns, it's still a Ponzi scheme. It
Yeah.
was 50 years ago. It still is today.
right.
And so you get a lot of press around raising a lot of money. You get a lot of press around unicorn. You get a lot of press around IPO, but you don't get a lot of press around the quiet entrepreneur who's bootstrapping because they don't have any fundraising announcements. And when they exit, it's a private transaction. They don't have to report it.
Right.
And often they don't want the attention, and they don't want to, that it's private, or there's a lot of reasons why. When a VC exits, they want it to be public because it helps them raise more money for the next round.
Yeah.
But the reality is there's a much higher failure rate than anybody would like to admit in business in general and in venture funded businesses. So I've watched a lot of companies that are venture funded come into tech, a lot of announcements, and they go out very quietly.
Yeah.
And it's hell on the founders. I mean, it really is, because they jump on a train that eventually leads most of them to owning 5 to 10% of the business they started. I had many friends that jumped on the VC train, and this is not an anti-VC talk, by the way, because I'm an investor. Full disclosure, I invest in VC funds. I just think that the bootstrapping mindset can really be beneficial, because the out of control mindset is we're going to raise $50 million and we're going to spend all of it in 18 months.
Yes.
And so when they inevitably pivot their business model, they've already run out of cash.
Right.
And then they're done. And I've seen it happen too many times. I've had it happen to too many of my friends. And honestly, I had too many of my friends that were fired from their own companies. Mm-hmm. And that was pretty depressing to walk through as a friend with them. So.
Yeah, and it's I bootstrapped my company, and we took on a little bit of debt, but it was really credit card debt.
Me
right?
too.
I never borrowed I never went to the bank and borrowed a bunch of money. Now, for a real estate project like the Stella, absolutely, the
You
Stella
have to.
has debt, but our company that I started out of the spare bedroom of my house
Yeah.
was bootstrapped, right?
And that kind of debt's different.
Yeah.
That's secured debt, right? So
Correct.
that's
Yeah.
secured by real estate assets. That there's actually a hard asset underlying that debt, which
Yeah.
is. And I talk about using debt. That use
Absolutely.
Debt. It's fine to use debt. Everybody has to use some debt.
Yeah, but
And
I
you can
can't-
also get out of it as fast as possible.
Oh yeah. So let's go back. I want to go back to like your first chapter here. And I really thought that the stories of you and your dad or your grandfather and your father were really telling, because you mentioned a minute ago, you said quietly, right? Well, your dad sounds like the quiet type. Like he was very quiet in how he ran his
Extremely.
business. So tell us a little bit about your dad and how that inspired you.
Yeah, my dad's one of my best friends. I mean, he's a really great guy. He's 84, still alive, by the grace of God only, because he had 3 heart attacks in front of me 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And I helped bring him back. It was a really scary but exciting moment that, like, your best friend, you can help keep him alive. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad, because he's gotten to see a lot of really cool things in the last 5 years. He and I share a lot of common hobbies, but he grew up dirt broke on a farm in Southwest Mississippi. And so when he turned 18, he joined the Navy. I tell that story. He joined the Navy. He's the only guy I know who has seen a nuclear bomb explode in person. Multiple.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was on observation ship in the South Pacific back when we used to blow islands up in the 50s. And so and then he went to college. Then he went to grad school and left after a semester because he didn't like snow in Purdue. And he came back to Louisiana, where I grew up, and he started a hospital equipment company out of his living room. Yeah. And he bootstrapped and sold 4 companies.
Yeah, let's stop right here. What does bootstrap mean?
Yeah.
So the people in the room would go, what in the heck does bootstrap mean? I may not be from Texas. What in the heck are we talking about?
Yeah, bootstrapping, by my definition, is when you build what you have to build so you can build what you want to build. In our business, we built hundreds of websites, We built graphic design. We built brochures and logos. I built her website. I built so many people's websites and logos and design and brochures, and we used all the profit off of that to build the software we really wanted to build. Because I didn't want to go raise a lot of money, so we started with $5,000. We ended up getting loans for $63,000 more, so $68,000 total to launch the business that now employs 270 people. You know, bootstrapping is really exciting, but it is the long, slow, painful way of building a business. It is arduous. It requires that you have to go do something you don't necessarily like. I didn't like building websites at all. It was the available service. People in 2001, people needed help building websites. Yep. And I derived joy out of building a business. What I really wanted to do from day one, like the first day in the dorm, because I started in my dorm room, and I sketched down the whiteboard, was build enterprise software.
Right.
And that's what we're doing today.
And so your dad, when he started his company, he probably didn't have a lot of options.
No.
In terms of other than bootstrapping.
No,
right?
there weren't.
I mean, he could have gone to Shark Tank. I'm sure they were all set up in the day, right?
1962, there was no
Oh yeah,
Shark
so
Tank.
1962. Who would that have been, right? You know, Thomas Watson, whoever. But no, you were forced to bootstrap. And you think about the mentality of farmers, right? I mean, farmers are, I'm going to figure this out. My father-in-law is he grew up dirt poor on a farm, right? He can fix anything because he had to. They didn't have Walmart down the street. They didn't have Amazon to send stuff to them. When stuff broke on the farm, you had to figure it out and fix it. So your dad's mentality was probably, okay, I got to start this company.
Yeah.
Right? And he starts this company and bootstraps it, and tell us how the rest of that story quickly goes through.
It turns out building hospital equipment. Now, back in the 60s, they didn't have the regulations that we have now. We have people in the pharma business here saying, man, there's no way anybody could start a pharma or a medical device business. Can you imagine, out of a garage? Not going to happen these days. But he did. And they tested the pressure on eyes. His brother-in-law, my Aunt Sarah's husband, was an eye doctor and told him the device they needed. And he built it because he was an electrical engineer. Oh, wow. And he'd never built medical equipment, but he built this. And it worked. And then they manufactured it and they sold it. After 2 years of it, though, he was just running out of money, and he realized the real money was in the service business. Mm-hmm. So he sold that business, and he started a hospital equipment service business, and for years did extremely well, traveling around on these recurring revenue. The best business model on the planet is recurring revenue. Retainer service contracts, maintaining hospital equipment. And then in 1979, there was this new thing called Teflon. Don't know if you've heard of it. But it was a new thing back then, and they entered the Teflon manufacturing. He sold the hospital service business, and he sold his machine shop, and then they built the Teflon company. The year I was born, they started Industrial Plastics. So that was the company I grew up walking around. But the catch was he didn't want it to be a family business. His dad, he didn't want to be in his dad's family business, farming, and he made it very clear to me when I was a kid. He said, "You will never work for me. You will never own this business. Yeah. You got to go figure it out on your own." He goes, "I will do two things for you that most kids don't get. I'll give you one American car."
American. Yeah.
My father's 84. Yeah. And I will pay for an undergrad degree at a public school.
Public school. Yeah.
And he said that most kids don't get that. I didn't get that, but that's what you're going to get.
Yeah.
He went a step farther, but I would argue he got some great returns because he became my partner and invested $68,000. And let's just say the ROI calculation
was pretty good.
Pretty damn good.
Yeah, it worked out all right.
Yeah, it worked out all right for him.
Good for him.
I was by far his best investment, but that was his. He did have to bootstrap. And a lot of these lessons come from him, and then I had to learn my own way because obviously business has changed a little bit too.
Yeah. So did you have in your business? So you have this great father figure that's helping you through this and teaching you how to bootstrap, right? And so you have some institutional knowledge, which I want to touch on TSU here in a minute. But you have great institutional knowledge with that. But did you have pressure along the way from partners, your spouse, whoever, to go, hey, forget this bootstrapping stuff. Aren't they willing to pay you a lot of money? Can't we just make this happen, right? Can we give up our equity, give up our ownership, and just get the big payday, and maybe the salary, because the salary would be so good, right?
It would have been great.
Yeah, we really got to have the salary, right? And tell me about the pressures of that. Because this is not easy, guys. Bootstrapping is not easy. Speaking from somebody who's done a little bit of that, right?
A lot of it. You've done a lot of it. And there's a lot of bootstrappers in here, and I think y'all agree it's not easy. I made more as an intern at PricewaterhouseCoopers than I did for the first 8 years of this business.
No, wait. But you're the owner. Don't you make the most money and get paid first? Don't you get paid first?
So
as the owner, right?
we got paid last.
You get paid last,
and
yeah.
it was, and often there wasn't money left.
Right.
And I had to keep my salary artificially low to make sure there was enough cash. The great thing my dad did not do is he did not bail me out when things got tough. He said, I'll be here in case you're about to go insolvent, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so he forced me to figure out how to make money. If he would have given me $1 million of paid-in capital, I can guarantee you this book isn't even written.
Yeah.
Because you don't have to learn the lessons the hard way. They don't become yours. They're not your own. And so definitely had to figure it out. In particular, like we had some really bad days. I mean, really bad days. We lost accounts, lost clients. 9/11 was a terrible day, y'all. I mean, the entire economy cratered. September 8th, 2008, when Lehman Brothers collapsed, that was awful. I mean, revenue declined. I mean, and all of those were events. COVID. I mean, honestly, after 19 years, I thought COVID was going to take me out.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of us did. We were like, the economy's going to zero. We're probably not in business a few months from now.
Sure.
And so you have all those events, but if you don't have to go through the process of surviving them, you don't really learn anything.
Right.
And the temptation's always there, and particularly in technology. My industry is unfortunately ripe with people that are always offering money. So the other problem you have is not internal pressure. And I was blessed with a wife who never one time, Spencer, and I mean not one time, complained about having to count pennies. Mm-hmm. Like for 7 years, she had to call me before she went to the grocery store to see if we had enough money to buy groceries.
Sure.
So that she never once complained. Yeah. And that takes a lot of entrepreneurs out as a spouse who's not on board. Yeah. My other business partner, who's my right-hand man, Sebastian Costa, never one time complained. Yeah. And so I didn't have internal pressure. A lot of people deal with that. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of external pressure because in the mid-2000s, venture capital firms, they started calling tech companies and tech founders every day. Yeah. Hey, you want money? You want money? You want money? They still do. I get a call a day still, an email a day of people trying to invest. Really what they're trying to do is take over your idea. That's the general idea with this whole thing. And they run boiler rooms. And so the pressure was really external to take money and just get off the train because it's just so exhausting always being worried about making payroll that at some point you want to throw the flag up. And I remember in 2005, I was sitting around in my office on Southwest Parkway looking at Monster.com and job ads. Yeah. And I was looking at all the jobs where I could make double of what I was making as the head of a CEO of an international company. Yeah. And I could go take a job making double what I was making. It sucked. So the pressure is really external.
And so you walked away from that why? You walked away from that Monster.com.
Because I'm a sucker for punishment, I guess. I mean, you walk away because you have an infallible belief in yourself and your team.
You just know.
You just know that you're onto something.
Yeah.
Like eventually, and I'm sure for those who have been in this, like whether you're in a job or you're doing business, like at some point you know. Like you know if the drug's in a cellar, you know if the green chilies are going to be sold, you know that Chewy's is going to come buy a bunch of green chilies from you, or whatever it is, or you know that there's a bunch of hotels that need bookkeeping, or you know these things like in your back of your heart. You just know that there's a really opportunity, and I think that good entrepreneurs have a good gut and they listen to it. Like my dad was talking to me the other day, and he said, you have a pretty damn good gut for what's going to happen. I mean, you called this right and that right, and I said, look, I don't know if I don't know what that is. Yeah. I just listen to it and roll, and he's kind of the same way. If something feels wrong, at some point you got to trust it.
It's your 10,000 hours is what it is. And really for you, 30,000 hours, right?
Yeah, Malcolm Gladwell, who talks a lot about the 10,000 hour rule, he also has a book called Blink, and that's really great. But there's a lot of commentary out there on thin slicing, on what your brain's actually doing, and how most of the time when we make a decision, we've already made that decision in the first 3 seconds of meeting somebody. We've already decided everything we're going to decide about that person. It's scary how much happens subconsciously with us, and I think you have to either hate yourself for that or just lean into it and just at some point trust your intuition and then try to inform yourself enough that you're improving the computer that's working there.
Right.
Because that's a lot of business decision is like, does this, I mean, right now I'm in the middle of it again. I mean, does this feel right, like the right investment on real estate? Is this feel like the right property? I'm talking to this owner that I'm about to buy this property from. Do I feel like he's actually telling me all the truth on this? I mean, you're in real estate, and you came over and rescued a failed deal here. You know, and you had to come and step in and fix something that was broken. Right. At some point, your intuition had to inform that decision on this massive development that y'all turned around. Because y'all did what others couldn't do. And so it also takes good operational skills.
Well, it takes a little bit of experience, right? So
Yeah.
you're bootstrapping, and your wisdom is built up over these years, right? And it's your experience, your 10,000 hours, like we said.
But the challenge with raising money is that entire cycle gets compressed into 6 months.
Yeah.
And you're expecting 23-year-olds or 25-year-olds to be handed $3 million or $2 million and be wise stewards of it and make good gut feel decisions with very little life experience. And so that's the challenge. Now, it works in many cases because they have a great board of directors and great investors who guide and steer them and keep them out of the ditch, or they hire really good people in. But the stakes are much higher. When you go to pivot,
right,
you often don't survive, and that's the challenge with it. It's a very challenging path to take.
Yeah, and survival, by the way, I think is one of your chapters.
It is.
Right? It's rule number one in business.
It is.
Is the business has to survive. You talk about COVID, right? So we have investors in the Stella Hotel, for example, and COVID comes, the hotel has to shut down. There is no conversation about distributions. There's no conversation about increases of salary. The only conversation is survival.
Yeah.
That's it. And so, and I hate to keep talking about these negative things because nobody ever going to want to start a business in this room if we keep talking about negative stuff. But let's go through survival really quick. Was there a time in your bootstrapping career that the very survival of your entity was at stake?
Yeah, I'd say, let's talk about this. I have the date, January 14th, 2008. One of my employees had not been doing his job, and he'd been starting a side hustle and not paying attention to his main hustle, and we had a bunch of servers go down, and it took all of our systems down, which is a big deal because we had 80 companies that couldn't check email or have a website or get to their software or manage their inventory. It was a big deal.
And real quick, tell people what you do for a living with this company.
Yeah, well, what do we do right now?
Well, with that company.
Yeah, well, at the time we were building software and websites for anybody that pays.
Oh, that was anybody. Okay.
Yeah,
So that's not that wasn't your construction. That wasn't your construction stuff.
Well, we had just started SmartBid, and I had my first 32 clients on board. SmartBid was a construction bidding system for bidding out buildings like this. Actually, we actually ended up bidding out about a third of all projects in North America. Ended up bidding through our software by the time we sold it in 2018. So I'm really proud of that because we had a big impact on the construction market. But we had just started. We had our first 32 clients. We had 80 clients that we were hosting websites, email for. All the systems went down, and we lost 5 days of data. It was horrifying. I mean, horrifying. And it happened because we had a power brownout at our data center. So the data center screwed up on their power feed. My guy wasn't paying attention to his job, and the backups had been failing for 5 days, and he ignored the warnings. And I went outside and started crying. Called my dad, like a little boy.
There's no crying in business.
There's no crying in business. There's crying in baseball. There's crying in business. Because when you think that you've just invested 8 years of your life, and not making any money for 8 years, and it's all going to evaporate because a data center couldn't keep the power running, and your employee wasn't monitoring backup alerts, you cry. You cry.
So how'd you get through it?
He told me something really important that I think is that I've used every single crisis since then, and there have been many. He said, James, relax, remember, this is not everything of who you are. Life is bigger than this. He said, but really important, what can you do? Because you're talking about a lot of things you can't control right now. Like what is like the one or two things you can do at this very moment that will help with this? Because, you feel bad, and that's understandable. What was interesting, my dad is very gruff, and he does not show emotion, ever. Ever, ever, ever. I've seen him cry twice in my entire life. But he was super cool about it. He didn't give me grief for losing it, because he understood. Mm-hmm. He understood where I was at. Yeah. But then he said, look, what can you do? And I said, well, I can call the customers and apologize and offer them service credits and tell them everything what's going on. And he said, all right, well, go do that.
Do that.
Call me later.
Yeah.
And so I spent 4 hours on the phone, and I spent another day the next day calling everybody. I didn't hire. I have a great PR firm now, and I didn't hire a PR firm. I did it myself. I called them all. I explained everything that happened. Full disclosure. I didn't hide anything. I offered them service credits, and the crazy thing is we didn't lose any of them.
Yeah.
And we just hustled the next 2 weeks to get the systems back online, restore the data. Like, it was hard. And our customers actually walked with us through it because I didn't hide anything. And what was interesting is most of them had similar days.
Sure.
And then they told me those stories, and I thought it was all over. And when COVID hit, I also thought it was all over. And the interesting thing is, this time I didn't cry. I just went to the management team. We had an hour meeting. We talked about it. We said, okay, 90% of this is out of control. What can we do? We made like 5 decisions and executed, and that was it. We hunkered down like everybody else did. But that was a seminal moment. We still talk about it a lot. There were a few other times where I thought we were over.
Yeah.
When things got really tough and sales weren't happening, and you put your product on life support. You start to call it dead, and then you turn it around. But that was the worst single moment.
Yeah, and those things are real, right? I mean, they become very real to you because you read about them in the newspaper or online or whatever, and you read about all the percentages of businesses that fail, but then you go, that'll never happen to me, right?
Yeah.
It'll never happen to me. And so you're faced with that moment, you're like, here I am, right? And then it's just the perseverance, right, that you've shown, and it's really, I think a lot of that is coming from your grandfather and your father and the lessons that you were taught that, okay, what can I do next, right? I also love the part in the book because we have a rule in our family that people do business with people they like. So that's our rule number 1 is people do business with people they like. And the very first chapter, I think 3 times in the chapter, you talk about the reason this happened to my dad, or the reason it happened to you, or the reason it happened to whoever is because this person liked this person.
Yeah.
Right? And so your customers probably liked you.
Yeah.
Right? It's simple stuff.
Yeah, you actually have to build relationships. This is the challenge for me right now in this world. And I'll be honest, I have been preaching at JBKnowledge for 21 years to our hundreds of employees that the only constant is change. But we're in a pretty big change period, and going remote was really hard for me. Mainly hard because how can you get people to like you, and how can you build relationships if you're not with them? And I don't know about y'all, but I don't do a lot of relationship building over Zoom and FaceTime. It's transactional, right? Like we talk about the meeting, we talk about the issue, we close the meeting, we move on. We don't sit around and we don't do a lot of BSing on Zoom. When we actually build relationships is when we're together. Yeah. And so that's been what I've been trying to do lately is bring a team together. But the main thing too during COVID, I'm fortunate that I can fly myself around, so I didn't worry about the airlines. My dad's a pilot, mom's a pilot, mom's dad's a pilot. We've been flying a long time in our family. And during COVID, there were no restrictions on private travel at all. And so I literally flew to all the cities where my customers were during COVID and took them to eat outdoors on patio. I plumbed the depths of outdoor patio restaurants around the country just to spend time with my clients because I was deeply concerned and remain deeply concerned about losing touch with our customers and not spending that slack time with them and going and having the best thing I think you can do is have a meal with somebody. The best thing. You're breaking bread together. It's a very personal thing to eat with somebody, whether you understand that or not. There's actually, and I was reading a book recently, there's an abnormal value people place to having a meal with somebody and to being treated to a meal by somebody. That's actually very high because you're satisfying a need that's very important for them, and that is to eat. And so you get that time with somebody, and then I will get 10x more information out of customers on what's really bothering them and what I can really help them with, and then about them. I have ended up being friends with my clients, a lot of them, and it's led to deep, meaningful relationships that have lasted even after selling SmartBid. I'm still friends with the customers, still text with them, we still talk. And I think that's really important. Why can't you be friends with people you work with? It doesn't mean they should be your only friends, but if you don't, people still do business with other people at the end of the day. Deals are done because people like other people. Right. And it's not the problem in software as a service is they really like to talk about customer acquisition cost, and they really like to talk about scalability, and they'll look at that type of sales process and they'll just say, that's not scalable, because they're right, because it requires a lot of time and trust building. They want hockey stick growth. They want triple, and then they want you to hit $10 million and still have a 60% growth rate every year, which is bananas, y'all, to have that kind of growth.
Now, the math doesn't work very well.
It doesn't work very well. And it's really hard to do that.
But if you control your own company and you're the owner of your own company and you're the captain of your own ship, then you get to decide. If I want to grow 10%, I grow 10%. If I want to grow 20%, I can try to grow 20%. Right?
But it's not just about starting your own business, right? So I do a whole chapter in here on corporate entrepreneurs and like how they can innovate on a bootstrap budget inside of an existing company. Like that's really important too, is like there's a lot of people who aren't going to start their own business. They want to innovate in a place like Texas A&M, or they want to innovate at a large insurance company. Or like I've got a friend who just became head of innovation at AXA. They're the largest insurance company in the world, $153 billion a year in revenue, and she's bootstrapping that effort at that company, right? Because you have two choices: go to the corporate investment committee, ask for $10 million, or take the profits from your division and get and then plow them into a new initiative. So you can bootstrap at a company, and you can still be the captain of your soul, to quote the poem, right? Sure. You can still have a lot more control over your destiny, even though you're in a big enterprise, because they'll respect you for the fact that you didn't come to the kitty for $10 million, that you used profits from your division, you still hit your goals, but then you invented a new product for them, and that's a big deal. So the principles work everywhere. I've seen bootstrappers in public universities, and I've seen bootstrappers in public corporations. I mean, it's a mentality I think that's just kind of under discussed.
Right. And real quick, you pointed to Shelley. Just make sure you tell us time when it's time to go to Q&A. I don't want to lose track of our time. Thank you very much. So I'm gonna switch gears on you just a little bit here, because one of the things you talk about is service. You talk about how do you take the wisdom you've accumulated and help other people. And you walked up to me however long ago it was and said, hey, I'm a regent of Texas Southern University, right? Everybody knows Texas Southern University in Houston, Texas, right? Like, James, how in the world did you become a regent of TSU? So tell us the story.
If you don't know where Texas Southern is, it's in 3rd Ward, South Houston, just south of downtown, right across the street from University of Houston. It's a historically black college, so about 86% African American. It was founded in 1927 as the Houston Colored Junior College. It was formed the same year as the Houston Junior College, which was the Houston White Junior College, which is now U of H. And in 1947, the state of Texas created U of H and Texas Southern out of those two colleges. I've always believed in public service. My great-grandfather was a city councilman. My dad was a city councilman. I was a city councilman in College Station. In fact, you and I worked on a bunch of deals together when I was on city council. And those are all volunteer gigs. Those are unpaid volunteer gigs. And when I got term limited, so I served my 2 terms and was term limited, I applied for any appointment. I just went to the governor's appointments office and said, I don't know what life is like without having some public service in it. You have 600 appointed positions. Just anything will work. And insurance commission, or I'm thinking tech. Yeah. I'm thinking insurance, maybe construction. Things
something about.
Things I've spent 2 decades on. Right. Now, I had the pleasure of teaching with this fine young fellow here, Ronnie Hill. I was an adjunct professor at A&M for 5 years, and I did get to teach for a long time, and I get to hang out with these cadets a lot, and C2, my outfit. So I know a thing or two about teaching, but not public administration of universities. I learned a lot about that, but the governor's office called me and they said, during your interview, James, you said that you were a fixer and we have a situation that we need fixed. A third of the board resigned and the president was terminated from Texas Southern a couple of years ago in 2020, in the middle of COVID, mind you.
Good timing.
So they were dealing with COVID plus massive board turnover and presidential turnover. And we need some people to go help work on it. And I talked to my wife. I said, what do you think? Sounds interesting. Totally not what I was expecting. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, around a very prominent HBCU there, Southern University. I went to high school like a couple blocks away from it. Yeah.
You got internet from it.
I got internet from Southern University.
Right.
I really felt like I owed it to. I'm like my entire start was because Southern and HBCU took a chance on an engineering school 2 blocks away. Like, let's do this. Yeah. And my wife said the same thing. She's like, this sounds awesome. Like they really need your help. And so 2 years ago I jumped in, accepted the appointment. Senate had to confirm me, and stepped in October of 2020, and just had my heart broken a lot. Because of what I saw was going on with campus. Amazing students, great faculty, severe underfunding, severe public underfunding. To give you an idea of how bad the underfunding situation still is, UT gets about $60,000 a student. Texas A&M, this is 2 years ago data, not today data. Texas A&M got $47,000 a student, U of H got $18,000 a student, and Texas Southern brought the tail at $15,000 a student in public funding. And so at some point you have to ask yourself, like, is this intentional? Why is the per student funding so drastically different? And so I started just digging in, because I you know this about me. I like to know all of the info. Right. And so I just dug and dug and dug. And the board put me on as board secretary and maybe in charge of legislative affairs and donor relations. So I get to raise money from the state and from private donors. And so for the last 2 years, I've been lobbying in the state capitol and meeting my students, finding out what their needs are, lobbying for the high funding programs, because that was a big thing. We weren't getting our programs approved. And it turns out they have an aviation program.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
And I didn't know that when I accepted the gig. And I am obsessed with flying. I am a pilot. I fly 300 hours a year. And I don't think they'd ever had a Regent that was a pilot. They didn't even know they had airplanes. And so I got and they had 20 students in their aviation program, 9,000 students in the school, but 20 in aviation, and they had 2 airplanes. And I'm happy to say 2 years later, we now have 6 airplanes, about to get a 7th. We went from 20 students to 56.
Wow.
We signed 2 contracts with the Air Force to train their cadets. Wow. Which we just executed our second of 2 contracts, and we were on the verge of a major deal that I'm really excited about that I can't talk about publicly
Fantastic. Yet. So tell us about it.
But at the end of the day, I think you'll see us be if it breaks our way, we'll be a powerhouse in aviation training. Yeah. And that's at a time when we're short 6,000 to 8,000 airline pilots right now and commercial pilots, roughly. And that number is supposed to widen to 60,000 in the next 10 years. And when you look at the differential in pilots of color, it's way bigger. And the same thing with the military. We just commissioned one of our aviation students to the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard admiral, when he was done, said, I need more guys like him. Because not only do we need pilots, we really need pilots of color. We need a more diverse workforce in the Coast Guard and the Air Force and the Navy. And we're going to produce it at Texas Southern. I mean, mark my words, we're going to produce it. Because we have the capacity, we have the facilities. We're the 4th largest city in the country. We're at Ellington Field. But we have a lot of other great programs other than aviation that really stand a chance. What's exciting to me is that $1 at TSU goes about 20 times farther than $1 at my alma mater, Texas A&M or UT, because they raise more in single donations at the major universities than our entire endowment. Our entire endowment is $83 million. The large public universities will raise more than that in single donations. And so, my wife and I endow a new scholarship every year at Texas Southern because the money goes a lot farther. You're helping way more people. Stanford, and this was a Malcolm Gladwell statistic, Stanford raised $100 million to fund a program that only supported 100 students. $100 million at TSU is our entire university endowment plus. Right. And so that's why I'm so excited about those opportunities. Also, I think it's important to acknowledge that while I talk a lot about bootstrapping, I still had bootstraps. And my students at TSU don't even have that. Yeah. They don't have a dad or a mom who is an entrepreneur. They have a dad and a mom. They have great families. But they don't necessarily have one that was an entrepreneur. 81% of them are Pell Grant eligible. Yeah. So that means they're very low income. So they don't have even $5,000 to start. They don't have a dad or a mom who is an entrepreneur. They have a dad and mom who worked hard their whole life, sent them to college. Great families, great students. Desire, willingness. It is amazing how little it'll take to tip someone like that over the edge and make them an entrepreneur. $5,000 and a little bit of mentoring, and you can launch them. And so that's my goal is I want to launch a ton of businesses out of TSU because it takes a lot less money and it goes a lot farther. And we can have a really strong, diverse, ethnically diverse, economically diverse entrepreneur base in Houston. And you know, I think it's the right thing for us to do. It's the right thing for me to spend my time. It takes a lot of time, but it's worth it. Cool
story. And don't we have a movie coming out now that's like perfect timing for you in the aviation program at TSU? What's this movie called? Do you guys know it? The Korean War? Devotion. Yeah, have you seen this trailer for this movie?
I have not seen.
Yeah, it's about an African American pilot in the Korean War. He has to go through all those issues of being the first African American pilot and deal with that. And so it might be a great segue for you guys.
It will be. I mean, I tell you what, we're getting a lot of press right now, and we have record signups, and I'm excited about the opportunity. But again, what are we doing at TSU? We are bootstrapping that program.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have the funding from the state. We don't. So guess what happened? The Air Force contacted us and said, we want you to train 12 students. We're going to pay you $250,000, which is a good fee per student to train people on how to fly, because the Air Force recognized that they want their cadets arriving with a pilot's license, because there's about a 20-30% washout rate, and they don't want to do it on their dime. They want to do it on somebody else's. So we were going to say no before I got there, and I stepped in. I said, because we didn't have enough.
Say yes. Just say yes and figure it out.
They literally had prepared the letter saying no, thank you, but we can't do it. And I said, throw that letter away. We're going to accept it, and we're going to figure this out. And we're going to use the funds. We're going to buy the airplane, and then we're going to contract out the labor. We have to bootstrap this. And they're like, we have to do what? I'm like, no, we have to use the proceeds from this contract to get the next one. You know the really cool thing? It ended up we still generated a profit in the first year.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And we took our fleet from 2 to 6. I mean, it was really exciting. So the principles work. They work in any environment.
Well, they're lucky to have you on that.
Well, I'm lucky to be there.
I want to definitely touch on values, right? Because you and I spoke at a leadership conference a year ago or so.
We did.
And your talk and your take on values was really, really meaningful to me. I mean, I took it to heart, and I remember writing these things down. And I don't do this lightly, guys. I mean, I've been around a lot of smart people in my life and a lot of really inspirational entrepreneurs. But when James was talking about how values are instilled, that was really, there's a really cool thing. I know you have a chapter in your book about it. So you kind of touch on values really quickly before we go to Q&A.
Yeah, I'm a believer that if you can't repeat it, you don't believe it, right? Like if you ask a Christian, what's the number one verse that defines Christianity? They might say John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave only God's Son, which you believe no perish have everlasting life, right? Like that's a fundamental verse to Christianity. If you ask any other faith, they're going to have these verses from their Bibles or whatever it is. They're going to have things that define what they are. And I'm not a believer in moral relativism, basically self-determinant relativism, where you basically wake up every day and decide what your values are based on how you feel. Because that doesn't work well in the real world. Because then emotions are dictating every decision that you make. If you have no moral standard, whatever it is, and by the way, this is not I'm not speaking pro or against any belief system on the planet. I'm just saying having values and sticking to them is really important. Because otherwise you're really just a leaf blown in the wind. Yeah. And the business is the same way. If a business doesn't have values, define them, talk about them, have people memorize them, actually memorize them. We have an acronym, DB's D, and then be able to repeat them. They don't believe it, and you're not going to use it. And if you don't have a set of values, then you're a leaf blown in the wind. Mm-hmm. You're going to get blown by the latest presidential race or the latest economic news, or what your competitors saying. Like one of the worst things you can do is make all your decisions based on what your competitors are doing, right? I mean, because it's not about your values. And you'll say, well, our competitors are doing that. We need to do that. But wait, they're getting all this. Well, yeah, but are they doing it your way? And so we've always done this, but when we adopted EOS, we got hardcore 7 years ago about our values. So ours are do the right thing even when no one's looking. Be self-motivated and resourceful. Show respect to everyone. Be a JBK ambassador 24/7. Think lean. Have each other's backs and enjoy the ride and geek out.
Enjoy the ride and geek out.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Number 6, like you got to have fun. We're a tech company. This should be interesting. And so we hire people on that. We fire people on that. We evaluate them every quarter on that. And look, we're not perfect. Like, getting a plus means 90% of the time or better you adhere to your values. Because, like, we're flawed. I have failed on each of those in my business. I am far from perfect. I have made a lot of mistakes. I have a very forgiving staff. I have a very forgiving business partner who, in business, have been willing to forgive me through my failures. But I will say this: they called me out on my failures. Yeah. They held me accountable for them without fear of getting fired, and they referenced the value when they called me out on it. And like, what? I mean, that's pretty strong on their part. Yeah. And so I think it's important that you do that, because otherwise you just get, there's just too many pressure. There's too much pressure. Mm-hmm. I think the same thing goes for America, our state. Like, who are we as Texans? What's our identity? What's our values? I mean, we have to decide and stick to it. And Jim Collins talks about this a lot, which is why EOS talks about it. That sustainably great, they studied the S&P, I believe, over 20 years, and sustainably great companies had values and stuck to them. The values were radically different. Like, Walmart's was like cost cutting at all costs. So even their headquarters reflected this cost cutting mentality. Whereas other companies were, it must be the most premium product possible. I mean, you can have wildly different values and still experience great success. And but it's that you stuck to them. And I think if you look at like elite athletes, they all have the same goal. So like, goal setting is not the thing that generates success, right? Like, every athlete wants to be, if they're worth a darn, they want to be an Olympic athlete. They want to be Olympic gold medalists. So setting a goal is not the key to success. It's how you execute it daily, and then the values you have to get you there, right? So that you don't get pushed around as you go up through that. Because you have to say no a lot if you're going to be successful in anything. You have to say no to a whole bunch of things. Yes. And so we have to say no to a lot of software projects that the client wasn't the right fit, the project wasn't the right fit.
It's scary to say no. It's really scary to say no,
especially when you're questioning if you can make payroll the next day.
And you're like, I can't believe I just said no to that. Yeah, I totally understand it. Shelley, you think it's time for Q&A? But thank you for all the value stuff. By the way, the value stuff, I think, and when you read the book, take that to heart, really, because those are your yellow lines. I mean, that's when you know, if I get outside these yellow lines, I'm really giving up on what I believe in, right? This is what I believe in. I'm going to stick to my guns. You might go down in flames sticking to your guns, but you're probably better off because of it, right? You're probably better off because of it, because if you give up on those values, who are you? Exactly. All right, let's take some questions. I know we got some questions out here. Yes, sir.
So I similarly have a web agency trying to transition to a product. And so I'd love to hear more about your journey through that process and how you were able to handle that.
Thanks. I haven't met, I'll say this, 95% of the web and software agencies I've met all want to be a product company.
Yep.
The 5% that don't just haven't realized that they want to do it yet. Because it is true. It is really exciting building your own product that you can sell as a license rather than selling time. There's an old phrase that the billable hour is the source of all misery. Because it's a really brutal way to make money is to sell hours. That's, I think, why lawyers have such a hard time with their profession, to be honest with you. The good ones fixed rate their work.
It's in that book, 4,000.
It is. It is. There's a lot of discussion around that. And I'm a believer in that, because I've sold a lot of billable hours. I still sell a lot of hours. Key one was building a successful agency model where we sold time and actually had a profit. Right? Like, you have to have a healthy margin, because you're going to consume at least 50 to 70% of that margin spinning up a product shop. Key two is to take whatever your estimates are on revenue for that product and cut them in half, and whatever estimates you have on expenses for that product and double them. And then you might get close to what the first few years are going to look like, because it's really brutal. I mean, launching SmartBid consumed a ton of cash. It was our 5th or 6th product to launch. We built a content management system, we built an e-commerce system, an intranet product, a project management portal. We built, I can run through the list of products that we built, trying to find one that would take. So that's step one, is you have to build a profitable business that's going to generate enough cash to do this, and you have to be really conservative on the estimates. And then you've got to take the really hard step of sacrificing profit and hiring developers. And here's the thing where I see a lot of agencies make a mistake, is they have developers in their spare time writing code on internal projects, and I've never seen that work well. I say dedicated butts, dedicated seats. If you're going to really take something seriously, you've got to hire people that are going to actively work on just that and that alone. They're going to go to bed thinking about it. They're going to wake up thinking about it. Innovation doesn't happen in spare time, and product development really doesn't happen in slack time, because there really is no slack time. When you're selling hours, you want them actualizing 150 hours a month, or you're not doing well as an agency, right? Like, this is the way it is. And so that's been the key for us, is spinning up dedicated teams, dedicated sales, dedicated marketing. Eventually, you'll get to that. In the beginning, you're the dedicated sales and marketing. Yeah. And then you're going to have to accept a lower growth rate of your agency business, because you're not going to be able to focus on it, because product is all consuming. And so you're going to have good account managers that can manage the agency business while you go build the product, because that's the other hard part. You've got to have the time. And so the mistake that we made is we wanted to spin up new products, but we originally just asked people to do it in their spare time. I see a lot of big companies do this, big corporations. They're like, well, you have 10% extra time, go work on this initiative. And it never gets done. Yeah. And so having a dedicated dev team and design team, and then dedicated sales and marketing people, once you hire people and you make it their job and you make their entire existence dependent on that being successful, you'd be amazed at how much better the results are. It really is quite remarkable.
We had one over here too. Yes, sir.
So, Logan Welch, by the way, thank you so much, James. Say I'm a high growth startup, and I'm looking to get out there quick, high velocity, but I want to bootstrap my own capital. One of the other sells for VCs and kind of getting plugged in with them is also the network, being in someone's portfolio, the business connections that come with it, the big name that comes with it. What was your own experience doing that kind of guerrilla style bootstrap networking and bootstrap connection building?
This is one of the best networks that was ever created on God's green earth. This ring got me into more doors than any VC could have. And I'll tell you, I spent a lot of time at Texas A&M networking. I was in the Corps, I was in a fraternity, I was in student senate. I was one of those over-involved Aggies who didn't like.
No, really? No. Come on.
I had a 3.0 in my actual grades as an undergrad, and I had a 4.0 in involvement, the other education. And I'll tell you that my first 8 clients were all Aggies. Everybody talks a big game about their network. Everybody does. And good VCs do have a good network, and I'm a limited partner with some of them. It's legit. Some of them do have networks. But you have a bigger network than you're willing to admit. And you're going to have to do a lot of your own network building anyway, right? At the end of the day, it's going to be on you if you're a founder. Now, being bootstrapped and being high growth can sometimes be mutually exclusive. It's hard to be really high growth if you're bootstrapping in the early days. You'll hit it, like MailChimp. MailChimp was bootstrapped, like the whole way, all 20 years, a 20-year overnight success, right? The founder's worth a couple $1 billion. They think what was the exit, MailChimp's exit? I can't remember, 7 or 8 billion. Yeah. That was a bootstrapped exit, and he and his partner still owned like 80% of the business, and I think he ended up walking away with 2.7 or $3 billion. And I was just at one of his speeches, 20-year overnight success. They eventually hit hockey stick growth, but it was not in the early days. Now, they were masters of product-led growth, right? They were masters of having a product so good that people saw it and had to have it and didn't have to talk to a salesperson to use it. And by the way, that applies to things more than just tech, right? Like that can apply to a restaurant and a menu that's just so good you have to have that food. And you just have to talk about it to your friends, right? Product-led growth applies to any industry. And it's certainly it's the gold cup for all of us. But I would say VCs offer lawyers and accountants and advice and network, all of which you can buy by the hour, all of which you can really tap into your Aggie network. And so whatever your network is, we're here at College Station, Texas, and this my first 8 customers, and when I started SmartBid, if there was a ring on someone in that room, my chance of landing that deal just went to about 80 to 90%. So it's a big deal, and that's more than any VC could do for me. No, I'm not dogging DC. I'm just saying, like, you have more than I think you'd be willing to acknowledge.
That's a great answer, by the way. Hey, who else? I think I saw another hand. Yes, sir.
So you were with that business for 8 years, and it wasn't growing very quickly.
No.
So how do you know, you're doing a business for years and years, and you're not making a lot? How do you know that the idea is worth pursuing? Whereas maybe it might be an idea that would not be very successful.
Well, we were growing enough for it to be interesting. The growth was consuming all the cash, and so was all of our experiments at new product. And it wasn't until 2007-8, so that 8th year, that we made enough for me to pay off all the debt. And that happened to be right before the September collapse of Lehman Brothers and the economy. And I was so thankful that we had no debt, because we paid all the debt off and we didn't have any loan payments during the Great Recession. And we actually had a revenue decline for those 2 years, slight revenue decline, kind of went flat. And it was, but we still actually lived better because we didn't have debt payments. We were growing enough that it was interesting, and we were getting enough interest in people. There was enough good demos and a good product. And like with SmartBid, it was the 5th product, but it was the first one that people saw and said, I have to have that. I have to have that. And so that's how you know, like when they see it and they say, I have to have this, and then you say, okay, give me money, and they say, okay. Right?
Wow.
That's the big key. I talked to a lot of people. I talked to a lot of people who do surveys, and Steve Tinkle here does a great talk on surveys. Some people do surveys wrong. They show people product and they say, if we build this, would you buy it? That is the worst question you can possibly ask in business. Because people will say yes almost every time because they know it's the answer you want to hear. And they'll just people please you. So the catch is, when they do that, then say, okay, I've got Square right here. Give me your credit card. I've got it available right now. And watch 80% of those evaporate. Because they will lie to you because they want to please you. And they know what you want to hear, which is the answer is yes. So you got to be really careful how you ask those questions so you don't get a false positive on what you should be doing. But SmartBid was like, yes, I have to have that. And we'd already started our insurance out. So remember, we ran kind of 2 businesses together. SmartBid, the construction bidding software, and JBKnowledge, the insurance software outsourcing business. We ran those parallel this whole time. And now we're running 3 parallel, SmartCompliance, Terra, and JBKnowledge. And the whole thing, all the pies are growing, right? And like right now in SmartCompliance, we went double the last 3 years on SmartCompliance. It's a good indicator. We flattened out a little bit because we had more competitors now. We're having to refigure things out. But on Terra, I'm doing all the demos myself. And by the way, this is a big part of here. The chief executive should be the chief spokesperson. I'm doing the demos. I did a demo today with a huge company on Terra, and they were really excited about what they saw and ready to spend money. That's a great indicator that you might be onto something, right? So you gotta be careful though that you're not creating that false positive. If that makes sense.
Chris.
Going to the back to the TSU side in entrepreneurship and bootstrapping in general. You've grown up your life, as you discussed with your dad, as this.
Yes.
You could see what he did and how he did it.
Yep.
The students at TSU, you're talking about if you just gave them $5,000 and a little bit of push.
And mentorship, yeah.
So that's the thing. What is it? What's required? What's necessary to get somebody who doesn't have that? What do you have to give them first to get them going?
Yeah, I mean, I love idea challenges because it helps spawn ideas, right? And most idea challenges with students are filled with problems, solutions to problems they're experiencing in college. And that is one challenge because they don't know any better, which is why sometimes it helps to get out and do a lot of internships and then go take some full-time jobs for a couple of years so you can actually see where the problems are. But sometimes you can just go like I did straight into consulting. Consulting is a great way to find the problems because people are hiring you to fix the problems. And so you can actually go out and discover all this infinite sea of problems. But I would say you've got to have not just upfront mentorship, you've got to have paired mentorship, and you've got to have some capital. And if you look at really good incubator programs, that's what they have. A little bit of money and a lot of mentorship. And mentorship over time. It's the same thing like with, you've got some cadets from company C2 here, my company in the Corps. When we started that mentorship program in 2007, we were in decline as an outfit. Our grades were going down. Our retention was down. We weren't winning any awards. we had all kinds of problems, and we paired fish with alumni. Now, not all the fish take advantage of that. Some take advantage of that mentorship, others don't. But as soon as we started continuous mentoring, we saw the same thing that you see in a business. We saw increased retention, increased grades, increased performance, outfit awards. And within 4 years, the outfit had turned around. And it just took the guidance of a bunch of 50, 60, 70-year-old men mentoring a bunch of 18-year-old boys who can shave through the process of growing up. And so I think the same thing at Texas Southern that we've got to do really well is pair people who have had some success in their life, because you don't necessarily want the blind leading the blind, right? You have some success in life, pairing them on an ongoing relationship. And I'm doing it right now. I met 2 guys down there that are absolute hustlers. I mean, I am so excited about these guys. They met me at a TSU event, and they're not current students, but they're in the Third Ward community in Texas Southern, and they just latched on. And we have mentoring calls every month. I'm not on their board. I'm not a shareholder. I think these guys are awesome. I think they're going to kill it, and so I'm trying to serve that role for them. And I think that's what it takes. But it has to be more than one person, right? We've got to line up hundreds. That's what A&M does well, typically, is pairing, when it does it well, pairing, alumni with students. And I think there's no better time to start a business than when you're a student. You're used to not eating anything. You're used to ramen and tomato soup and mac and cheese and all that stuff. It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it's important to start before you get too comfortable,
Yeah.
too much in debt, too many responsibilities, all these things. And so
But it's never too late.
No, never too late. I think we are out of one more question.
We can do one more.
One quick question.
Quick question.
You want Trey or Zach?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you learned from your dad that you'd like to share with those who are younger?
Like,
Hey, wait, what do you mean? Who's younger in the room?
Ones who have not
Are you looking at me, Zach?
After college.
yeah, no. So a lot. Yeah, the biggest thing that he really drilled into me was not quitting. Because there were, and I learned this in the Corps. I wanted to quit 3 times, twice as a fish, once during Corps Brass, once during the spring, and then once as a sophomore, believe it or not, I wanted to quit again. And the 3rd time I wanted to quit, I called him, and he always, you got to persist, son. You made a decision. You have to commit. You can't quit. If you quit, and I remember this, the 3rd time he goes, if you quit now, you will always be remembered as a quitter in this organization. Like you've been there a year and plus. Like you can't have that in your legacy, that you're better than that, right? And that was one of the things that he always drilled into me, was like just persist, just being tough, and just sucking it up and just dealing with the mess that you're in and not giving up. At some point, all of us have to make decisions to stop doing things. So it doesn't mean that you should never quit anything, because at some point you do have to stop doing things. But he knew I really wanted it, and so I think that was probably the big moment for me. Was and the other thing he said, that he knew my dad knows how to push my buttons, and he said if you're going to quit the Corps, you might as well quit A&M while you're in a quit mood.
Oh, there you go.
And that was it. Like my spine went straight and went. I'm up years old, man. I'm not gonna quit A&M, and I'm not gonna quit the Corps. And I mean, I was having a hard time. I mean, but that was big. But it was really big in business too. There's a lot of times I wanted to quit early. And I'm sorry for the long answer on this, but 3 years into SmartBid, I got an offer to get bought out, and I almost took it because I was desperate for money. Like any money. And it was like 2010, 11, and a guy offered me basically the book value of it. I mean, a few $100,000, I think. And it was more money than I'd ever imagined having. And I got this close to taking it, and my dad said, no way, you cannot quit right now. Right. We're onto something, it's growing. This guy is lowballing you. I mean, and he was 100% right. And we ended up getting a bunch of other offers, and I charted the offers once, and it just went like, and we got to this point, I call it the optimum value point, OVP, when your growth rate's slowing down and you're about to start taking a haircut on your company valuation, that is when we exited it.
Yeah.
Because it was going to be either raise money or exit, and I was ready to move on to
Time to
something
do it.
else. So that was probably the biggest lesson from him, was just not quitting, like being tough enough to stick it out.
Perseverance.
Yeah.
What can you do today, right now, to stay
Yeah.
in the game?
What are the tasks you can do right now in the mess you're in?
Yeah. Well, fantastic. Do you have a square with you?
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm going to buy this book, right? So I want
Okay.
to make sure you got a square.
Yeah, this is Katie Zeppieri. So she's with Mike Drop Agency, and she helped me. And is Liz still here?
She's out there.
Liz, are you here? Can you come here?
Are you here?
She has her baby. She just had a baby.
Jason's baby.
Liz, this is Lucy and Liz. Lucy's the baby. Liz edited the book. So let's give her I met Liz when she was 11. Her father was the commandant of the Air Force Academy, and her brother was corps commander. And I went and visited her and her family when she was 11 years old in Colorado Springs. And then she came here to A&M. Her dad at the time was in charge of U.S. Air Force Europe. She came here and she worked for me as an intern. And I had the distinct honor and privilege to be her boss for 10 years. I'm going to get emotional because I love her so much. She is amazing. She is a military spouse. Her husband's in the Marine Corps, and this is her first child. She helped me build SmartBid. She helped me market SmartBid. She helped build my speaking career. She was amazing, and she edited this book and turned a pile of words into a book. She's also an amazing human. Her father ended up being chief of staff of the Air Force, and he is currently the dean of the Bush School of Business. Mark Welsh is her father. And so Liz Beechenor now is her name, because her husband is lieutenant or captain now? Lieutenant Beechenor in the United States Marine Corps. And so I just want to thank her for the incredible editing. I want to thank Katie as well for helping push the marketing across the line. And Katie does have the books and the little square to process those.
Perfect. I want to thank you for showing up and for writing the book. And James has been a great citizen of Bryan-College Station for a long time and has done a lot of great things for our community here. So thanks, James.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it. Thanks you guys for coming in.